All right, welcome to a special edition of the StartupSac podcast. Today we're at the studios of Trifecta Systems again. Thanks out to them. A shout out to them. They do organic meal delivery. Startup right here in Sacramento. Today's special edition is a diversity edition of the podcast, and with me in the studio I've got some friends, some entrepreneurs here in the Sacramento region to do a kind of a round table or rectangular table discussion about diversity in the Sacramento startup and technology community. So with me in the studio here, I've got Victor Patton, who is the reporter, writer for the Sacramento Business Journal, Donte and Dominic Morris from the Startup Hoop Maps, Veronica Smith from SEED and the City of Sacramento Economic Development Department, and Michael Purnell from Cvent, and Nicholas Hastings from Square Root Academy. And we may have Mariah Lichtenstern joining us a little later on. But I'd like to now turn the time over to Victor. He's agreed to moderate this panel. So without further ado, Victor, take it away.
Hey, thanks, Jeff. Hey, glad that everybody could be here today when we're talking about diversity. And Sacramento, I've looked at some recent statistics here. According to the website Smart Asset, we are ranked first in the nation for ethnic diversity in terms of STEM careers, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and our workforce here. And they cited government initiatives that further fair hiring practices in the city's Innovation and Growth Fund, which currently stands at $14 million, as possible reasons why we are coming where we're number one in terms of like diversity in our STEM workforce. But I know that obviously numbers can only tell so much of a story, and I think it's great that you're all here so we can talk about what the reality is in terms of like diversity in our tech sector here. So anybody can answer this question. How is Sacramento's technology sector doing in terms of diversity? Are we hitting the mark? Is there need for improvement, or how's it looking? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think there's always room for improvement. There's ample opportunity in the city of Sacramento, which is what I think keeps most of us on this panel here. But in terms of being poised for growth, most definitely. Do we have a long ways to go? Most definitely. And I think that my counterparts here that are more embedded in the tech space can kind of speak to some of the areas where there's room for improvement in terms of having access to VCs, having access to networks and spaces to advance some of the technologies that they're working on. But with that, I'd like to hear maybe from Dominic, since you're so embedded in the app that you're creating and growing your tech company. What are your thoughts there?
Oh yeah, I'm Dominic. You're right though. Like us right now, we're in a stage where we are, searching capital to grow our business, and we do, oftentimes do look outside of Sacramento, just for the simple fact of, what fits us. Sacramento, it's good that it's small and that the tech scene is budding, but when it comes to diversity, I would say it's the same challenges like anywhere else. It's still a smaller number of, I don't see any VC firms, but you have Kwame with it was Angel Fund, and there's a couple resources available, but it's the same thing where kind of got to cash a net out there and see what catches. But I think the beauty is that ownership. Ownership is everything. Now that we have like people that's co-founding startups that are people of color, they know the perspective. So when we do hire and bring people on, we have that perspective to open up the door more.
Absolutely. Great. Anyone else have any thoughts about how we are doing in Sacramento in terms of diversity in our technology sector?
I think it's the same. Sacramento, even across America, is sort of the same. We have an issue, but we have room to grow. I think one of the things that we can do is we need to highlight the tech founders who are doing successful, like Hoop Maps or Square Root Academies or Cvent. We need to highlight them more and make sure they're out in the newspapers and highlight their success stories so that we can inspire more would-be entrepreneurs out there in the community to get out and start their own tech companies.
Cool. And Michael, really quick, what does Cvent do?
Yeah, so Steven, we show you the money and fun at live events. So pretty much we let you see the money before your event starts, so it can help you with the upfront cost or anything that you need instead of waiting until afterwards. And also we help you sell out your tickets faster with the affiliate program.
Excellent. And Nicholas, tell us really quickly about Square Root Academy.
Oh, sure. Well, Square Root Academy, we're a nonprofit organization dedicated to exposing our youth to the fundamentals of STEM. Guess I'll let you know what STEM is, just in case for those listening don't know.
Right.
STEM is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So we make sure that we're doing this for our community completely at no cost to our students. And we do it in the communities of the people that we actually serve. So we want to make sure that we ensure full access to our students and then to the people that are educating our students how to teach STEM.
Great, great. And Veronica, tell us really quickly, tell our audience here what you do at the city.
I'm a senior project manager that is focused on economic development in some of our most underserved communities. And I'm also have a dual role as acting director of the Seed Corporation, which is a private nonprofit entity that's focused on development and attracting investments in underserved communities.
Excellent, great. And Donte and Dominic, tell us real quick about Hoop Maps.
Sure. Hoop Maps is a mobile app that allows people to find pickup games in your area.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty much a sports tech company where people could connect, communicate, and really get together to find basketball games in the area.
Excellent. Great, great. One thing I just kind of want to throw out there is that I'm a reporter for Sacramento Business Journal. I cover technology, been doing it since November. So I go to a lot of technology events in Sacramento. A few times a week, I go and I see what's going on. And, in terms of diversity, I do see some diversity. I recently went to the Founders Institute meeting and saw that it was a very much of a representation of what I think the Sacramento's population looks like. But I'll be honest, there's been a few times where I've gone to some meetings and I've been kind of like the fly in the buttermilk, right? To use a phrase that was coined by Greg Tate. So it seems like like there is, I do see visually that there is some diversity. I think obviously the fact that you're here is proof of that. But I see that there probably is room for improvement. But being African American people in the tech sector that are running your own companies and making a big difference in the community, is it tough? Sort of like when you're in a room and you don't really see a lot of of our folks that are in the technology sphere. How do you get over that? Is it a challenge at all?
Well, you have no choice.
Right.
We don't have the luxury of having the option to just poof, here's another person that looks like me in this room with the same skill set. It's something that you pretty much have to get over when you're in this realm. For example, when I was in college studying mechanical engineering, I think in my graduating class of 100 students, there was about 2 other African Americans. In my time spent working in industry, there's only been 1 firm that I've been at where I haven't been the only African American there. So I guess I'm a little confused about that diversity piece being here in Sacramento, because if it is here, I don't know where it is, because in my industry experience, haven't quite seen it.
Interesting.
Yeah, even for me, I used to work at Intel, and they're working on the diverse matters, but it's still, sometimes you're only one of the few African Americans there. But for me, I don't really find it challenging. I feel like for us, we definitely got to bring our A games no matter where we go. And once we bring our A games, we can show the world who we are, what we can do. And business is business at the end of the day, so the best people are going to win it. So we just got to have that right attitude when we come in there.
Right. And I just want to let's welcome Mariah Lichtenstern with Cineshares. She just walked into the room. Hey, Mariah, how you doing?
Hey, Victor.
Hey. So, tell our audience here about what you do with DivereCity and your Cineshares.
Okay, so Mariah Lichtenstern, I'm the founder of Cineshares and DivereCity Ventures. So Cineshares is a marketplace for the motion picture industry, and DivereCity Ventures is an impact-oriented venture capital firm.
Excellent. And Mariah, the question that's sort of on the table right now is, being in a sphere where sometimes, we walk into the room and we might be the only African American or the only person of color. How do you get over that, and how do you deal with that? situation, or is it an issue even?
It's so funny because I was thinking about this the other day. I'm multi-ethnic, so I identify as Black, but also multi-ethnic. So what is that called? Someone had mentioned in diversity talk that there's a name for that when you find yourself sometimes as a woman or as a person of color. There's like different contexts that you find yourself in. But because I am multi-ethnic, my parents were Caucasian, my whole family, my community that I grew up in, I'm very much used to that.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to think that when you walk in a room, it's not going to be an issue. But then what happens is when you're confronted with the issue, whether it's a 1 or 2 or 5 out of 100 times, then you're like, oh, it's still an issue. So you kind of just deal with it when it comes. But I like to think that you kind of hope that when you go into a situation, it won't be an issue, and then you confront it when it is.
Right.
And it's about looking at it. I look at it as opportunity.
Mhm.
So, I think about meeting Mariah and others in Sacramento that were in this space. It's like, what can we do together to put us on the map?
Of course.
To ensure that there are more of us in the room.
Exactly.
So it's about the collaboration and building together as opposed to individually, because if we're not trying to bring other people on the journey with us, then it will continue to be one of us in the room.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And to add on to
Can I-
that, I
For
think
that was beautifully put. I'm sorry.
And there's a challenge both with women and people of color when there's a scarcity mentality where you feel like if there's only going to be one at the table, it's got to be me.
Yeah.
And I think historically we've faced that, and I think we're at a point where people are starting to value and appreciate diversity, and see the results in terms of bottom line to where there are more seats at the table, and so maybe that affects our willingness to collaborate on a psychological level.
Yes.
Dominic, what you were going to say?
Oh yeah, I just want to add on to the point and what Michael was saying earlier. It's I think it kind of go back to more about the publicity, like having more outlets, having more writers, TV shows, venture firms, more outlets to where we could kind of get recognized, more than in just a traditional place. And I think if create more of those and more discussions like this, then we'll see more of us out there, and we wouldn't just be a fly on the wall. Like we'll be kind of everywhere. We could kind of own our own events.
Absolutely. Yeah, one issue I think is that everybody has a different idea of what diversity even means, right? Because even though you might look up the dictionary definition and it says one thing, but what that word means to every person is going to have a different meaning. Like to me, diversity would mean if you look at a population of people in a workforce, the workforce should match that population, right? The geographic population. But to someone else, you might have like 10 people in a room, right? And it's like if you have one African American, one Asian person, one Hispanic person, and the rest of those folks are white, and 2 of them happen to be women, that might be diversity to some people, right? If you work in an environment where it's majority Black, and there's maybe like 2 or 3 people who are not Black, some people might say that's not diversity. Other people might say that is diversity. So I just want to throw out there, what does diversity mean to you guys, the word? I mean, what does that word even mean? Because it has so many different permutations depending on who you're talking to.
I think it's confusing. I take it as confusing. Like usually when people say diversity, I think they mean Black, but they don't want to say Black. So then they mix in like women and all different other ethnic and social groups. But I think originally it was meant for Black, but it's used for every other minority.
Right.
And kind of to add on to what he said, I think what diversity is, it's kind of tokenism instead of like a reflection of what the society's supposed to be.
Right.
So I think a lot of people take it as, so if you have one person of color, then it's diverse. But in actuality, diverse could be 10 people and maybe one person that's white. So it's kind of, to me, the meaning is tokenism, but it's not really reflecting what diversity is. And I don't understand the use of chief diversity officer. I don't understand that position because it seems real insulting to me. It seems like it's a position made for the company not to get sued so they can get their quota right. You know what I'm
Right,
saying?
right, absolutely. That's a good
It's
point.
like $80,000, expense a year to make sure that they are doing fair hiring practices. But I think it's made as a shield so they could not look at that company and say they're practicing.
And so it's sort of like it's becoming sort of like a corporate thing to sort of like meet a quota to
It's
avoid
insurance.
Get your
particular
numbers up, basically.
Yeah, it's
maybe
insurance.
litigation or something.
Maybe some PR, and hopefully, ideally, it's to be a bridge to signal to the community that, we're interested in welcoming, creating a more diverse workforce, but a lot of times those cultures are already so toxic that, you just look at the comment section, right, of any diversity article, or you
Right,
hear about the
absolutely.
backlash that, say, Google
Yeah.
experienced internally when they started announcing diversity initiatives. So a lot of times, even with the chief diversity officer, people still don't believe that it's going to be hospitable. And I think, let's just acknowledge, and maybe you've discussed it before, what happened recently in this country with Charlottesville, where people are like, oh, wow, it is an issue. And we're like, yeah, it's been an issue, but it's been covert. And so now you see it bubbling to the top, but we've been saying that we're experiencing this. So if we don't see those signals from the outside that a culture is going to be hospitable to us, why would we subject ourselves to that?
Right.
For me, diversity means variety, and with Diversity Ventures, one of our catchphrases is that we're capitalizing on diversity. But one of the things I notice in engaging in the diversity discussions is that some people also think that diversity means excluding certain people, particularly like white men. So for us, we like to say diversity includes you. So for us, diversity it could be geographic, it could be economic, it could be gender or ethnicity, but even among us, there's so much diversity. So it's really like, there's a multiplicity. It means variety. And sometimes there's a problem because the demographic is not reflecting the community. And so there's different ways where diversity becomes a problem, and it really depends on the context.
And I think in the state of California, we used to have affirmative action. And so now we have this term called diversity that is being used across channels to address something that we can no longer legally address in a way that it was addressed many years ago. So I think that's why it's confusing, because it's being used in a way that really isn't, if you look in the dictionary, like it wasn't designed to be used for what it is now being used for, given the topic of this discussion that we're having today. So.
And I think diversity, it could be subjective to anyone, but I think when it comes to diversity, you need to have a diverse team. You need to have people from all walks of life on your team, because no matter what, if you have people from all walks of life on your team, then you're able to know and understand their culture, and that's like more business for you. You can't have basically an all-white male team trying to target African Americans. They don't know. They're not going to hit it. If you got 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or just a bunch of people who are diverse, they can hit different markets, and that means a better business for you. So I think that's something that Google definitely needs to figure out, because if not, that's not going to happen, then maybe African American team out in Atlanta, they might create the next Google and they might lose out. So you never know.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, Michael, because I just have a statistic here. Studies conducted by McKinsey & Company show that there's a linear relationship between ethnic diversity and financial performance. Studies indicate that for every 10% increase in ethnic diversity on a company's senior executive team, earnings before interest and taxes rise 0.8%. In addition, companies in the top quartile for ethnic diversity are 35% more likely to have financial returns above their respective industry medians, while companies in the top quartile for gender diversity are 15% more likely to have financial returns above their respective national industry medians. And this is according to McKinsey & Company. So there are even studies that show that this isn't just something that's a moral issue. This is also economic issue, and possibly an issue of why companies, it would be to their advantage to diversity financially, not just morally.
Yeah, and there's been studies that have shown that part of the reason why companies perform better with diversity is because it helps to eliminate groupthink. And so they've done studies that were like in juries and in other contexts. And so if you have like a more homogenous group, they're more likely to kind of have the same POVs and not challenge each other. Whereas if you, look for example at the movie Hidden Figures, right? It's just, it may just be a different way of thinking that comes from an unexpected perspective. Right. And that's what makes it so beneficial. And then it also reduces barriers and it increases, the comfort zone, and we're then able to tap into, those valuable but maybe underutilized perspectives.
Absolutely.
It just makes sense. Diversity, logically. At the core of what we do at the Academy is innovation. At the core of what we all do is innovation in some regards. To have innovation without diversity seems a little contradictory. If everyone, like you were saying, is thinking the same way, there can't be any new ideas derived from that.
Exactly.
So of course you need to bring in different people from different walks of life that have different experience, that have a different perspective. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. You're going to stay stagnant. You're going to stay exactly where you've been the entire time.
You miss opportunities.
Yeah. Right.
There's an opportunity cost in that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Also, just while I'm on the topic of studies and numbers, so even though diversity is, the numbers show that, and the studies have shown that, this is for the benefit of companies. Barry A. Williams, she's the head of North American Business Operations for StubHub. She wrote an article earlier this year titled "The Tech Industry's Missed Opportunity: Funding Black Women Founders." And she was citing evidence by First Round Capital. She wrote that founding teams, including a woman, outperform their all-male peers by 63%. Still, female CEOs only get 2.7% of venture funding, while women of color only get 0.2%. So, it seems like there's a disconnect there with the investment side, right? And even though the numbers show that it's to the company's benefits to have diversity, the investment, as far as like the founders, CEOs, especially Black women CEOs, they're not seeing the investment. Why is that? Do you guys have any thoughts on why that might be? What's going on?
Well, there's a number of different factors with regards to that. It's been something that's been understood in the African American community or Black community for a while, that we have to work twice as hard to get half the recognition. So it makes sense that, of course, these African American women are performing better and getting better results and getting so little recognition. That's that's already understood. Yeah. I don't know what's going on.
It goes back to economic empowerment, though. Like, we got to look at what outlets are there available. If we always go to X amount of venture capital firms and you look across the table and they're all white males, then of course they have a whole different, perspective, no matter how good your idea or business is. So it goes back to how many Black venture capital funds, how many groups where we could fund our own, resourcing and get our own, home run out there. So I think it goes back to, getting a lot of money, putting it together as a group, funding entrepreneurs and making it happen on our own.
Yeah.
And I think as entrepreneurs, that's where our focus needs to be at. Like, we shouldn't try to seek acceptance or money, from just anybody. I think that should be a principle that we all could take, that, us getting funding from African Americans, and we actually passing it down. I think that should be more the route that we should look at, as far as, wondering why we didn't get accepted or why we didn't get into this VC firm or this accelerator. I think we need to start from our own resources and, build it ourselves, and, and then we can see how far we could grow within our own community.
Right, kind of like the Booker T. Washington model.
Yeah, like the Negro Leagues. The Negro Leagues was the third largest business in the African American community. Integration happened. Now you have 0 owners in MLB. Once we had 100% owners. It goes back to that. And the Negro Leagues not only fund baseball, but you had Black taxis, Black sports writers. You had the hotels. You had a whole industry that followed one product. And that same thing could happen if we us as being entrepreneurs here, we build in our own ecosystem. So not only will we be able to build, but we could go to a SAC state or we could go to a school. We can bring up our own interns, and then we could always kind of teach them, how to do it from the ground up. Us having this mentality is very important, that we look at that as a source, as opposed to looking outside of trying to find funding.
Absolutely.
And Mariah and Veronica, just want to make sure you get
Black
you guys.
women.
Yeah, we want to make sure we get you in there for sure.
I'm curious to hear what the brothers have to say. So, no, but there's obviously something to be said if you look at Black Wall Street, for example, and what happened. I mean, obviously we have historical issues that we just can't ignore. Like, some people like to sweep it under the rug and act like it's over, but it's not. There's multiple historical issues that affect current dynamics. So among those are like the wealth gap and access to where there's fewer people who come from Black communities that are able to access like the prestigious education, even K through 12. Our real estate taxes fund schools, and that channels into what kind of schools we get into, and are we mingling with the good old boys that end up becoming venture capitalists. And when it comes to women, we had this conversation the other day where someone was giving a sports analogy. Women are typically, funneled into playing football. So if you give me a football analogy, I'm probably not going to bond with you in the same way. You know what I'm saying? And so a lot of it is like, as a Black female founder, if I walk into a room, I don't pattern match, first of all, if it's a room full of white male venture capitalists. And they may have assumptions or implicit bias that associates me with a different role. And that historically has been subjective, it's been submissive, it's been hidden, right? And so, they look at what is the likelihood of this founder succeeding, of getting follow-on capital. And if they have some kind of implicit bias that's affecting them, it's going to transfer into other areas as well. So I think there's something to be said for, us having our own, and Richard Kirby has a great report on who's a VC.
Absolutely.
But we've also got studies that show that when we have Black or female partners, that sometimes they feel like they're going to be looked at like they're favoring their own. And then we don't want to get into the position where we're also, segregating ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a benefit to affinity groups that people can tap into. But I think what we need to do is disrupt some of the patterns and protocol for investment, such as referral from a CEO in a portfolio that a VC is invested in. Any VC will say that's their number one source of deal flow. And I understand that because they may get 2,000 submissions per year. But they need to look at other criteria or make a mandate that we're going to look at women and we're going to look at people of color even if they don't come through our trusted networks, or we're going to do a little extra effort to mine for them. Mm-hmm. And when we start putting the pressure on for them to diversify their protocol on sourcing investments, then I think we'll see that we're not limited or having to wait for us to have our own, and then everyone's able to capitalize on what we bring to the table.
So it goes back to the theme of opportunity, and I'll just say I'll say something that's unpopular in the African American community, but I think that we have a duty to, as African Americans, launch incubators, accelerators, be developers, be venture capitalists. So you have historically Black organizations who were leading the charge in advocating on our behalf. That began in the 60s. We're in a new paradigm. So those tactics that worked then and maybe worked 10 years ago don't work in this space. And so the conversation, the narrative really needs to change. And it begins with podcasts like this. Right. So it's like, it's old news. It's not new that we're not getting opportunities, that the percentages are dismal, that there are no VCs. We have an African-American female VC right here. We have everyone on this panel is an African-American entrepreneur, starting companies, launching companies, running nonprofits, developing buildings, enterprises. So this is, the narrative has to be about this, as opposed to what's happening in the past, what continues to happen. It falls on us in our era, this generation, to change the narrative, because what happened back then, it's not going to get us to that next level.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh no, just concurring. I was agreeing.
Yes. One thing I've heard, I was talking to Kwame Anku, who's a local investor, brother, with background from Ghana, and also heavily, has a group called the Black Angel Tech Fund. It basically invests in African American founders. And one thing that he said I think was really, really important was, for a long time there's been an idea that, how do we get Google to hire more Black folks, right? Or more Hispanics, or, more women? Or how do we get, these bigger companies, to hire, make diversity a priority? But these companies have been hugely successful without doing that, right? So if they're going to keep being successful without doing that, what's going to be the incentive for them? And he said the incentive is, the alternative is going to be, we have to be not only be self-starters, but we have to fund, we have to support African American and African businesses, and we also have to get investment for those founders. And so it seems like in a lot of ways, just what I'm hearing there sort of mirrors that idea, and it seems like Veronica, in a big way, that sort of mirrors what you were saying. Am I right there?
That's most definitely our new reality. So folks can either come along with the new reality or continue to live back there and report statistics and the problem as opposed to developing solutions.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. It is a new era. It's a new generation, and we have to treat it accordingly. And I think this generation we're more for collaboration. I'll ask some of the older people, some of the older generation, like, hey, it's great to meet you. Who are you? Finally, glad to finally see you. Oh, check my LinkedIn. That's not welcoming in the slightest.
Yeah.
That's actually it's very counterintuitive to what we're trying to do here, if that's building community. And with regards to Google and things like that, that's great and all for us to talk about that, but like Veronica was saying, like people have been saying here, I'm more interested to find out what's the next Hoop Maps thing. I'm more interested in what CVent is going to be doing next. Something that already doesn't have the issue of a lack of diversity.
Yeah, and I have a meme that says, don't beg for crumbs, bake cakes, and own the bakeries.
Yes.
And it's along those lines. I have many friends in Google. I know both of the VCs at Google Ventures, two of the black VCs, the first two black VCs at Google Ventures. And I applaud those companies for what they're doing, but we can't wait. There's going to be people who are going to go in there, they're going to get their stock options and those, nice salaries, and they're going to influence the culture from within, and more power to them. That's great. But we can't wait. We need to, find disruptive means. We need to find ways to circumvent this problem with the wealth gap and having to get friends and family and whomever else to fund us to where we can even qualify to get angel investing, and that's going to take cooperation. That's going to take us paying it forward and introducing each other to other people, both inside and outside our respective affinity groups, so that we can, rise together and create those cultures and lead. Because how can you expect a company like Google or any other, I don't even mean to target Google, but how can you expect a predominantly white and Asian, say, company that has no historical context or training in diversity, very little liberal arts background, to understand those dynamics and lead? We can do that because we live in it every day. We have to live that existence every day. And that's why we talk about it so much. Not that it's our favorite topic. There's a lot of other things I can talk about in diversity. I got a kid, I got a life hobbies, all kind of, other things, but we live it, and so it's a top priority for us. So we know how to lead. And we know how to work together with other cultures. And so when we create our own and build diverse teams, we can be an example for how to grow culture.
Right.
Absolutely.
And it starts here with this podcast. We got to just keep pushing, sort of start a tech revolution and what we're trying to do. Because when it comes to black VCs, they're fairly new. They're out there, but they're still sort of new to the game. They only can invest in so much. And I'm starting to notice that a lot of entertainers, rappers, or even sports people are starting to invest into tech startups as well. But they're still new, and they don't know too much about that as well. So we just got to just keep it going, just keep talking. And I feel like one of the problems that I noticed is when it comes to black founders is really finding mentorship. Like we're there, but it's just like we don't have that one-on-one mentorship to really just help us get to that next step. And when we're introduced to VCs, they're just like, oh, okay, well, I like you, but what about this one? And they just leave us alone. But I think if we have that one-on-one mentorship from other successful VCs or black VCs out there, that'll definitely help us along.
Absolutely. Well, it's important you mentioned mentorship because I had mentors when I was growing up, and that was great. But we also got to have mentors that talk about financial accountability, right? We have to have mentors that talk about coding, that talk about, the stock market, knowing the stock market, knowing what kind of stock to buy, these kinds of things. so it's important to have those mentors that are able to really talk about finances and those kinds of things as well. Nicholas, I know that you have Square Root Academy, and you talk to a lot of young people in the community, and how are we doing in Sacramento in terms of like bringing the young people along, to the next generation with this with technology?
Well, I think we're doing pretty good. The future is looking pretty promising. We teach our kids, they know about 3 different coding languages almost.
It's good to know.
So they're experienced with tech. They're prepared from that standpoint. On the other hand, this past weekend around the corner where my students go to school, 4 people were shot. 1 was murdered. So there is the tech thing. We can thrive. We can do great. There is nothing wrong with us,
No
mentally.
lack of genius.
Yeah, I'm sorry?
No lack of genius.
No lack of genius. No lack of genius. There's other systemic issues that are really plaguing us that don't really allow us to thrive in these realms. You can't really be the best coder or the best maker when you're worrying about what you're going to eat that night. You can't do these things when you're worrying about how your teachers are going to antagonize you, really just paint you in this negative picture. The other day I had one of my students ask me, why do white people think we steal? So these are the things that we have to face in our community, not just in the tech realm, but just in the African American community. So there's lots of other issues that need to be addressed as well.
Gotcha.
Which is why I think we need to just have the Black VCs or more programs that fund programs like Square Root Academy, so they can be able to afford to just offer better classes or just to help their students out a lot more. Because like you said, the people in your classrooms, they're very talented. I mean, very talented coders. I mean, they can go on to big Ivy League schools, but it's just since they're in the community, they don't have access to certain things or resources. So I think that's why we need to focus on more community programs so we can get more students coming out. I mean, because theoretically, every weekend our kids, we focus on sports, but why not tech? Why not hackathons? Why not get them enthused into it or whatnot? Why not teach them about the whole Internet of Things or using Raspberry Pis, where you can basically customize your house, where you can make your own, customize your doorbell to where you can have create your own ringtone with your doorbell, something like that, or or change your lights. I mean, something interesting. So I think we just need to basically just be able to fund more programs like he has, and then just make I guess technology a little bit more interesting, so you can bring in more people into the programs.
Yeah. And with all the issues that are kind of facing us, it's really going to take like a unified front.
Yeah.
I'm a strong believer in the saying, it takes a village, because that's exactly what it's going to take. Just like Michael was saying, a lot of people in our community are interested in getting their kids in sports and things of that nature. I actually had a parent tell me, no, my son doesn't need this, they're going to be a ball player. So they get their futures cut off from them before they even have a chance.
You look at the stats. Labor shortage and engineers, lottery with athletes.
Exactly.
But one of the points that you bring up about the systemic issues, which let's again, yes, we have to move on from history, but historically it's systemic, and we're still experiencing those ramifications. They're still real. We're seeing, the stats from everywhere from policing to hiring, with a certain kind of name on a resume. I mean, these things are still real and persistent. One of the exciting things about when I met Veronica is that she works in economic development, and she's looking at communities like Del Paso Heights and working with organizations like the Urban League. If we want our kids to thrive, we have to look at, why aren't we bringing businesses in here? Why are we looking at the home value and not looking at other criteria for bringing a business in? Like, okay, these people have no school loans, and so they have low debt, and they actually own their homes, and maybe their homes aren't worth as much, but they do have disposable income. So let's look at some other, metrics for bringing businesses in, because the reason why there's crime, there's always going to be high crime when there's low opportunity, when there's high poverty. So we need to start investing in those communities, and part of that is us, but we also need to seed from outside. And look at look at the systemic issues, get the kids out, bring opportunities in, and cross-pollinate.
Agreed.
Veronica, what do you think? How do we bring the young people aboard this tech train?
It definitely starts with mentorship. A lot of resources have been taken off of the table in terms of investing in mentorship programs, and we've been focused on surface level stuff that does not scratched beneath the surface that needs to be scratched. So it'll take disrupting the educational institutions, the school districts in these underserved communities that are funding things that shouldn't be funded over STEM.
Yeah.
If you go to a school, I won't use any neighborhoods, but there's some school where STEM is embedded in the curriculum. So they're learning how to build apps, how to create television shows, how it's daily curriculum. If it's on a daily curriculum in one school, why shouldn't it be in another that's in another neighborhood, in another zip code? That comes down to education, educating parents, educating the folks that are in these communities who don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
So it is a right, and if it's happening over there in that neighborhood, it should rightfully be happening in their neighborhoods. Then we'll get our youth more focused and geniused in the areas that count.
Yeah.
Math, science, engineering. Those are the pathways to them becoming the next Google or launching the next Google. But again, it starts in the environment. It starts in the neighborhood. So how do we redirect resources to a 5 and a 6-year-old in a Del Paso Heights to make sure that they're getting those critical things that will enable them to not drop their college course because they couldn't pass the math class to get into the engineering program, to get into the business program. I think that's the breakdown. So oftentimes we hear about there's not enough or we're not doing this when people don't understand what lies beneath the surface.
Exactly.
How our kids are getting redirected to criminal justice and communications by their professors because they failed that class. I failed statistics out multiple times, but I persevered. I was like, I'm not going to be a communications major. So we need to, have that mentorship in the colleges, in the high schools, in the junior high schools to make it's not an option for you to not get through it. So what do we need to do to get you through it so that these STEM careers and pathways are an alternative, an option, a major option?
Yeah, you bring up many barriers. These are real barriers. They're gatekeepers. And going back to being systemic and a lot of it being strategic. I mean, in business, we talk about barriers to entry. And a VC will ask, okay, you have this idea, but what's going to keep, Facebook from squashing you like a cockroach, as they say on Shark Tank, right? And it's barriers to entry, and those can be relationships. They can be, IP, but we have to look at what are the barriers in our society, and let's be real about it. Are these intentional barriers? We just got the covenants removed here in, El Dorado Hills?
El Dorado Hills.
Those are barriers that were strategic. And yeah, one family questioned it, and the kids went and got the petition to get it removed out from the covenant. But how many families bought homes in that community and saw it and didn't worry about it? Didn't worry about those covenants, right? And going back to schools, you don't want to name schools here, but if you look at Menlo Park in Silicon Valley, having a $3.5 million endowment for their public schools versus Oakland, which has STEM schools that don't have computer labs. We have to look at things like that. And why is that if it's public education? That goes back again, real estate. So those are structural policy issues. So policy comes to play. But in terms of mentorship, yes, we need mentors that address some of those things. We need mentors who tell us how to prosper in toxic cultures.
Yeah.
We need mentors who have been there, done that, and historically, partially because of things like Black Wall Street, we've had mentors go and hide. I got mine. You figure out how to get yours. Where we had Troy Carter come at an Indivisible meeting and say, when I came to my level, I've gotten to these rooms and I'm like, oh wow, there's all these black men here. Where were you? I never saw you. And he said, that's why I'm public. That's why I'm on Shark Tank, so you can see me and you can know that there's a path here for you. So we need all kinds of mentorship, from how to dress, how to deal with bias, how to use law and financial strategies, things that aren't on the surface. We need it across all levels.
Gotcha.
And I'd like to add on how to get just more kids enthused into tech. I mean, we need to treat our black founders like rock stars. I mean,
Good
if
point.
you treat them like rock stars, I mean, having them on front of Black Enterprise magazine, on TV, on BET, having them give them a seat at BET Awards and whatnot, like, highlighting them. I mean, that will enthuse them, because the only reason why a lot of kids want to be ballers, like Steph Curry, LeBron James, because they see them on TV all the time, and like that's just their own reality. But if we were to highlight more black founders, more successful black founders, I mean, just everywhere we go, I mean, they're like, oh, okay, I see Tristan Walker, he's here, he's there, and I want to be like him. You know, and I honestly follow Tristan Walker and other black founders, and you know, that sort of gives me more inspiration. So I think we just need to do a better job of highlighting more black founders, their success stories, where they're going. Have a reality TV show. I don't know, but it's just, you know, if you give the kids something visually, you know, for them to see that's successful, that you know, you sort of change their reality and their mindset. Like, you know what, I want to get into tech. They're doing it. I think it's easier.
I'm casting all of y'all on the net.
You can do it.
I mean, honestly, just being present. That being present is simply enough.
Yeah.
I've had so many students tell me like, oh, I want to be an electrical engineer, like my co-founder, DJ is an electrical engineer. Students say, oh, I want to be an electrical engineer like Mr. DJ. I want to be a mechanical engineer like Mr. Nick, or good Intel like Christina. So it's just being present, giving them something to aspire to be, because there's not a lot of people like us in how do I put this, that have had the privilege of being exposed to tech and being successful in that industry. There's not a lot of those in like a Del Paso Heights or a G Parkway or a Meadowview or places like that. So they really need to see that, because if they're not exposed to that, how will they even know that this is a possibility for them?
Right.
There's no way for them to know that.
That's a really good point. And there was actually some research done around that television show, A Different World,
Oh, yeah.
where enrollment in historically black colleges went up significantly because of that show. And the reason why that show was taken off the air was because of some of the issues that they were addressing.
Oh,
They
yeah.
were hot topics,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, I mean, we know that what we present, and that's part of why I got into Cineshares, why I started Cineshares, is to address, you know, the disparity in entertainment, where we have like 4% of Hollywood directors. It's up to 7% now since the EEOC came and investigated the latest time. You know, we have 50-50 graduation rates of women, but 4 now 7% of studio directors are women. And when you look at the statistics of who's represented, even though diverse films perform well, we're not seeing that reflected in the movies that are chosen. R-rated films are not the most commercially successful as family films, but they continue to make more R-rated films. So it's not always economic drivers, they're cultural drivers, and media is known as soft power. There's actually some political parties that were opposing China's influence in entertainment in the United States because of the issue of soft power. So the images that we see are very important, and even like you mentioned, the economics in the impoverished communities. There are people who are doing very well in black communities, but they're segregated by economics because, you know, for example, an intern at Intel Capital told me, I grew up in this, you know, community in Florida, and I've never seen poor black people. He's black, never seen poor black people. But that's still segregated because the people that he grew up around, the kids in Meadowview aren't seeing.
Absolutely. Dominic, Donte, do you have any thoughts on how we can help our young folks, get involved in the tech sector?
Just like what a lot of people said on the panel, just by showing up, us being present, us being visible, and us just always pushing the message that we got to create for ourselves. We got to lead. People see us lead and see us in this place, then they wouldn't desire to try to work for Google or Intel. They would try to start their own company. So as long as we push that narrative, I think more young people will go ahead and follow us. Yeah, exposure to everything, just highlight the people that's doing it, more Tristan Walkers out there, and really just put that just opposed to a Steph Curry or LeBron James, and, and let the kids choose.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Also I just ask you guys, before we close, how is the city of Sacramento doing in terms of addressing the issue of diversity in the tech sector? I know, Veronica, obviously you're probably a good person to answer this question.
I'm the wrong person.
Not to put you on the spot. Not to put you on the spot either, but obviously, we have Lewis Stewart, right? Great guy, chief of innovation here. We have things like the Rails grants that are out there, where some of these tech startups are getting some funding, and hopefully that's going to grow. You know, how is Sacramento doing in terms of at the city level incorporating diversity into the equation?
I would say that we're failing. Sorry, in all honesty, where's the camera? Like, we are failing, and I would be failing if I wasn't honest, but it's in, if you read the paper, the Business Journal, the Sacramento Bee, it's no secret that the city is not doing a good job. And you've probably, I'm not sure if the reference was to the city of Sacramento posting for a diversity officer, which the city is, you know, in the process of recruiting for a diversity officer, which kind of validates some of the points that were made around diversity and why diversity officers are hired to come into an organization. Is because numbers need to improve. So, so it's no secret. We have a lot of room for growth in this city of Sacramento.
Wow, well, thank you for your honesty on that question. You know, so they are hiring for our diversity officer at the city. You know, in terms of like, you know, diversity, you know, in Sacramento making it a priority, do you think that there needs to be sort of a philosophical change that needs to happen in terms of like, it's one thing to like be able to make the hires, right? Because you know, you're making the hires and you're hitting numbers, that's great, but if philosophically you're not sort of embracing the ideas behind why diversity is important, that's another thing. So is it a philosophical issue at the city of Sacramento, or
I'll just say that there needs to be a cultural shift. So clearly we've made some headway on the mayor and council side. We had you know, an African American male prior to our current mayor Steinberg. We have several African American men on the council, in addition to other ethnic diversities or ethnic backgrounds on the council. So on that side of the house, there's been some progress. On the city manager side of the house, there needs to be much more growth. And you know, we are the form of government that we have, you know, that's in a very important role. The city manager is an extremely important role in the city of Sacramento. And so his leadership needs to be representative of the face of the neighborhoods. Most of the challenges in the city of Sacramento are in what they call priority neighborhoods, or African American neighborhoods, Asian American neighborhoods, Hispanic neighborhoods. Some that were predominantly African American many years ago. So there needs to be more representation there in order to be able to represent the neighborhoods in which folks are appointed or hired to represent. There has to be an understanding. You can't get in your car, leave the city, and drive to your home in El Dorado Hills and expect to change the fabric. I can say that because not only do I work for the city, but I live in the city. So I have a right as a citizen to voice that concern. So you have to be proximate. You have to be able to understand your constituents in order to impact.
Anyone else want to answer that question, you know, in terms of like how the actual city government in Sacramento is doing in terms of addressing diversity in the tech sector?
I think they're doing what they need to do to an extent, as far as empowering the people to actually get the work done. My personal philosophy is they can help us out all we want, but this is an inside job. This is something that we need to solve. And it can't be solved by the government doing whatever it is they're doing or not doing. But I believe that the city is doing they're trying. But they don't. I don't think that they have the know-how to actually solve this issue. They don't. Just like you were saying earlier, they don't know, you know, these areas that they're serving too well. They know the numbers, but they don't know the people. They don't know their lives. They don't know what they go through. They don't know their day-to-day. So they're trying to solve an issue, and they're missing so many variables in the equation.
They're missing those diverse perspectives.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, data helps with so many things. data shows, okay, there's a problem, right? But data is not the end-all be-all. Technology is not the end-all be-all. There's always going to be a human element. Even when you're designing a product, you can have the best, tech per se, but if you have horrible design, no one's going to want to use it because user interface, user experience is part of adoption. So it's the same thing when you look at the city and addressing, these cultural issues. If you have people who have the perspectives from the people in the community, they're going to contribute it. But you don't know what you don't know. If you don't know that gentrification is an issue in certain communities, you're not going to address it or have a perspective of how to solve it. I think it's great that the city cares and is leaning in. One thing I think that the city can do is apply principles from the private sector, and I'm a strong believer in public-private partnerships. They can apply what we call like customer journeys and customer development. Go into the communities, go beyond just the little groups that assemble themselves and identify their own little hierarchies. Go beyond and really get street teams, boots on the ground, to see what do the people think about these problems. Is it even on their mind? If you engage them, they will start thinking critically, even if they don't know how to solve the problem. You'll get a lot of insight just from talking to them. And we need to deploy that, and that doesn't necessarily have to be a certain position. It can be, a whole consortium that's going out and collecting those insights. And I also think that people just need to go out, whether it's in a corporation or in a city, go out to those communities, eat in the restaurants, watch movies, read books, interact so that you're getting, again, that cross-pollination, that comfort zone, and understanding what the dynamics are.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you have practitioners and then you have tacticians. So the city has some great practitioners, but that only goes so far. Then where our roles come into play, mirroring what Mariah said, is being in the community, building in the communities, and understanding how to work with the folks at City Hall to launch your business in the communities at scale. So I'm not talking about, just someone that is looking at a storefront to launch a small business or a mom and pop business, but really looking at how other companies that are, getting incentives from the city or resources from the city, look at what they're doing and what their makeup is. How many employees do they have? What is their revenue like? Those are the models that people that look like us need to be modeling. We need to be looking at creating jobs. The city, my department, we're interested in job creation, wealth creation that spills into the communities. And so we and those watching that are building businesses should be looking at some of these lost communities or these communities that are not in the spotlight. The next wave is in some of these communities in the city of Sacramento because the arena is pushing a lot of folks out of opportunities. People don't want to leave Sacramento. And you have an influx of folks that are coming from the Bay Area because they can't afford to be in the Bay Area, who will need other places to live. So there's a lot of discussion around the 10,000 housing units that are poised for downtown. A lot of people can't afford to live downtown. If you look at the cost of housing, there's other opportunities for folks building businesses to be honing in on.
I think when it comes to Sacramento, they are doing something, but they need to move faster because the reason why is because Sacramento is only an hour and a half from the Bay Area, Silicon Valley. This is the world hub for everything tech. You have founders from all over the world who spend their time and energy to come all the way out to San Francisco, and we're only an hour and a half away. Why can't we be the alternative to Silicon Valley? Because I know, cities like Austin, Boulder, Colorado, Seattle, Atlanta, they have their own tech hubs that are literally almost better than us. So we're only an hour and a half away. Why can't we figure it out? Because we have an opportunity that we can harness just by being close to Silicon Valley. So we could be Silicon Valley 2.0 or basically an extension, just in case, if it costs too much, you can come out to Sacramento and you can host your company here, and then Silicon Valley is only an hour and a half drive away for a meeting.
So we need to move faster.
Yes.
We need to move faster and understand how to partner with the city and the county and the state to move faster.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the faster we grow, the faster we're growing companies, exiting companies, hopefully for everyone on this panel, then the quicker it'll move.
Yeah.
So it's about a movement. We're creating a movement here around what we're looking to advance in the tech space as it relates to African Americans in the tech space in the city of Sacramento, and how we complement the larger ecosystem that we've been working to grow. So we need to take ownership and responsibility.
Absolutely.
Speaking of ownership in Silicon Valley and partnerships, Veronica and I are co-founders, or co-directors rather, in the Founder Institute Sacramento,
Yes.
which is a branch out of Silicon Valley. It's headquartered in Silicon Valley. It's in 60 countries, 170 cities. We've created over 20,000 jobs, have billions in portfolio value. Our companies have raised over 600 million. Donte and Dominic are mentors. We'd love to have everyone here participate. We are being deliberately diverse, working really hard to attract diverse applicants. And the city has been incredibly supportive, but that's part of, we're identifying mentors, bringing them in, connecting them with up and coming founders, and we're modeling that Silicon Valley model in that regard. And the mission of FI is to globalize Silicon Valley. So we look forward to more partnerships, especially with the city, in moving that forward. We got an honorable mention at Greater Sacramento Economic Council. We had a specialist, Rick Rasmussen, come in from UC Berkeley, and he referenced the Founder Institute's canvas in how they evaluate ecosystems. In Canada, they have, in Montreal is actually giving graduates of the Founder Institute stipends to go out and launch their company so they can overcome things like, we have a minimum tax in Sacramento that for 70%, 80% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck is a hurdle. We have costs of incorporating, of filing the registrations required to raise equity. Those are all expenses, the legal fees. So if we can support those founders that have this hidden genius in overcoming those historic and persistent barriers, we'll get a whole lot more diversity in growing this ecosystem.
Excellent. Great. Well, I think this has been a very encouraging discussion. I just want to say to all of you that everything that you're doing really inspires me in my work that I do as the Business Journal, covering technology. And any parting thoughts before we close our discussion? Anyone want to put anything out there on the table about diversity that's important for our audience to know?
Well, I'll start just by talking to you guys here, I guess, at the table. I really believe in everything that we're saying in this conversation. I would love to continue the conversation. And I don't, when I talk about things, I'm not just talking. I want us to actually work together, to build together. So I'm extending the invitation if you guys want to work on something, or if you guys want to do anything with regards to building the community, I'm available and offering my services in whatever capacity I can.
Excellent.
I was just watching a video interview that you did with Startup Sacramento earlier. I got like a third of the way through and I had to jet out. I said, I'm going to come back to this. So I bookmarked it. So with that said, I want to thank Jeff Bennett and Laura Goodman for what they're doing.
Yes, thank you, Jeff.
And I think it's a great example, that diversity does include you, and the fact that Jeff took the leadership to assemble us together is a great example. And we, again, of cross-pollination, and we really appreciate you lending your resource and your platform to discuss this issue. I think that's just a great example of what we need to see more of. Also, Tristan Walker came up several times, and he is a shining star, and we all love to sing his praises. And so I'm glad that so many people are aware of him and that he is being visible. But I also want to mention some names that we might not hear often, and this is not it's not a comprehensive list by any means, but I want to give a shout out to Black female founders like Stephanie Lampkin, Joelle Burke, Macy Peterson, Heather Hiles, one of the first Black female founders to raise over $1 million, and there was only 13 when Catherine Finney did her report, Project Diane, which talks about Black female founders. So Heather Hiles has actually a successful exit as well. Again, Catherine Finney, who did the report, Project Diane, and VCs and angels like Arlen Hamilton, Keisha Cash, Mandela Schumacher Hodge. She's married now, so I don't know if I have her last name right. Also, her name is slipping my Laura Wildman Powers, I think it is, at Code 2040, a nonprofit organization that is training up, actually not even training, they're identifying very high profile, prestigious graduates and students in CS programs and placing them in high profile tech companies, and also HBCU to startup. So those are just some resources. Again, cross-pollination, we're very close to the Bay Area. You can look these people up, go have coffee with them, tell them Mariah sent you, and yeah, let's keep building.
Great. Anyone else?
Same here. I'd like to thank Jeff and the panel for just being here, just talking about this. Now I know you guys, and now I have someone to, follow up with afterwards. I would definitely like to build with you guys and connect and just build a network overall. And I think we're just going to keep it short and sweet. I mean, if Silicon Valley is not going to change the diversity, hey, we're just going to go off and build our own Wakanda. So.
Veronica, Donte.
Just thanks for the opportunity, and just a reminder to everyone to look at some of our underserved neighborhoods. I would love to partner on, helping land a launch pad for your companies. We need incubators and accelerators in the hood that are not operating just, out of other spaces, but home bases of our own. So, there's ways to make things happen. So.
You have any parting thoughts, Dominic, Donte?
I just, enjoyed our conversation and let's keep it going.
Okay. I just want to also give a special shout out to Jeff. Thanks, Jeff, for hosting us here, and also give a shout out to Trifecta for hosting us in their studios today. With that, we'll go ahead and close. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you for your education.
Thanks, guys.
Sac Business Journal.
All right.